I'm Lou Kerner with Crypto ZTV and Crypto Mondays, which is now in VR. And along with my partner for this call, Felipe Duarte with DAO Fest, we'd like to thank you for joining us on the second episode of the current state and future outlook for DAOs. Among the people on the call, I'm sure everybody's aware that there's been an explosion of DAOs since the Mullet DAO was launched in February last year. And other platforms are now rapidly evolving as well. So I'm excited to be joined by four thought leaders in the DAO movement who will each share their experiences and their views on DAOs, including where we've come from, where we are, and where DAOs are headed in 2020 and beyond. Each of the speakers will talk for about 10 minutes, and then we'll spend the last 10-15 minutes of the call answering questions from the audience, which you can submit at any time via the chat app on Zoom. The call is being recorded and will be available for replay tomorrow via the Crypto ZTV channel on YouTube. And we're going to start the call today with Danielle Kronovet with Colony, who will be followed by Zefram Lou with Betoken. Zefram will be followed by James Duncan with a line. And our final speaker will be Luis Cuende with Aragon. And with that, I will turn it over to Daniel. So Daniel, you want to take the screen?
Thank you, Lou. I would love to. Let me grab the screen right now. All right. All right. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be with you virtually. So the title of my little snippet is The Return of Cybernetics, the Computer in a World of Change, which I thought was kind of punchy. So first we're going to do a little history of cybernetics, just because I feel like, teachable moment. Professor mine once said, let no teachable moment go untaught, which really stuck with me. So I figured let's keep this fun and we'll learn about cybernetics. So anyway, so Stafford Beer was a British cyberneticist in the 60s and 70s. And he was really bullish on the ability of the computer to liberate the humans. That was really his thing. And this was a time when people were very concerned about what are computers going to do? Are they going to take away all of our jobs? Are they going to turn us into these cogs in a machine? But he really believed in the computer. And he actually wrote an amazing monograph called Designing Freedom, which I would really recommend. It's very wacky. It's got like that nice 70s utopian kind of vibe to it, but also a lot of really good ideas. So this is kind of his thought. And he actually, very interestingly, he was, during the Allende years in Chile, he was hired to build what was at the time, and even now, is like a very cutting edge and visionary command and control system for the government. Whether the outcome of that regime, whatever happened there, we can discuss later. But part of that was bringing on the cyberneticist to really design a system for running a new kind of country. Didn't work out, but the ideas, a lot of his ideas were quite interesting and are, I think, still really relevant today. And here's an excerpt from Designing Freedom, which it's long, but I think it's worth considering. And basically his point was that, the way that we run our organizations in our nations is kind of wrong, and the idea of looking at snapshots, how much GDP per year, how much money do we make this quarter? It's not really the right way to think about things. So what really matters is not, in a moment in time where all the resources are, but rather how are things moving constantly over time. If you want to be governing a complex system like this, you need to be knowing about the flows, not just, static snapshots. And this, I thought, was a good excerpt. And again, everyone should really read this monograph. It was great. So the world is always changing, and computers can play a key role in helping us keep track of and respond to these dynamics. And the 70s were really a time for big dreams, and maybe 2020s can be that time again. So just moving over to Colony, for those of you that are not familiar, Colony is a DAO platform that really revolves around work. And so there's going to be a couple slides about different facets of Colony. The first one is that it's oriented around work. People need to do things. Organizations need to provide outputs, goods and services. People are the ones that we want to be doing them. And kind of the definition of the work is usually done by other people, where, someone says we have to scope out some work, someone else wants to do it. But the things can be generalized even more so, where Is it people that are doing the evaluation? Can things be machine evaluated? To what extent can some of these processes be automated? To what extent can some of these processes not be automated? It's kind of a space that we're exploring. But basically, people do things to provide valuable outputs. And then we have an idea of reputation, which is something that we're very excited about. And it's driven by review of the work, which gives us a legitimacy. There's kind of a big question in reputation in general is how do we make these numbers legitimate? I think everyone has seen Nosedive, which was the episode of Black Mirror where everyone goes around rating everyone else. I think this was a very important episode. And I think one of the takeaways is that because the metric was so broad, it really lost its legitimacy. And I think that keeping these numbers legitimate but making sure that they're driven or they're the results of legitimate processes is very important. And in calling reputation decays over time, which means it's always moving around, which means that there's no one that's always in charge. Reputation is always being lost, even by elites, which is sort of acts as equalizer. But at the same time, people can have more reputation than others, right? It's not that everyone has the same amount of things to offer. There is room for heterogeneity, but the dynamic processes mean that the heterogeneity's downside is limited, while ideally the upside is sort of enhanced, in which some people just have more influence and because their opinions are higher quality. That's something that we want to also capture. Now with reputation, we can move into something interesting, which is budgeting. It's something I feel and a lot of the team feels pretty strongly about, is that it's managing the resources is really where the budgets are policy. And by managing the budgets, you give people control over the policies and practice of the organization. And this gets into a lot of the cybernetics ideas around, budgets are not something that are made once a year, but they are continuously being set by all of the participants in the system, which creates something that is quite animated and alive. And kind of like going back to like the kind of the Coase theory of firm ideas, by letting everyone have a hand in the budgets, you leverage knowledge at the periphery. You give people autonomy and you make the system more dynamic, which is very exciting. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is that we support disputes. And this is sort of what allows for self-regulation, homeostasis in a colony, where we let people do whatever they want. They can move money around, they can do work, they can evaluate work. It all happens without anyone sort of giving the green light. But then if you want the system to self-regulate, you need to give people a way to say something bad has occurred, we have to challenge it. And kind of one of our design principles is no unnecessary voting, permissionless by default. What that means is that as much as possible, if something can be done without a vote, we'd like it to be done without a vote. But if a vote is needed, we'll go to a vote. And the disputes process is really where that comes down to it. If no one challenges what you want to do, it can just occur. If someone challenges it, then we go to a vote. And there's kind of a dynamic at the end where depending on the outcome, the stakes are lost or not, which we think encourages people to take things to a vote when they really feel like there's ambiguity. But when the outcome is basically determined, we would like to incentivize people to just let it go. That's kind of our hope. And so all these mechanisms together, we'd like to think of makes Colony something of a cybernetic system, where humans are providing inputs, but the computer is really driving the process. There's time dynamics. There's like there's the structure of there's the smart contracts in general where things are enforced by the blockchain. It really makes the computer an active participant in the process in a way that I think Stafford Beer would have appreciated. Reputation is gained and lost over time. Resources are always moving around the organization. Disputes allow for error correction. And we'd like to think that the result will be a continuous output of value, which is sort of the goal here. So that's my little blurb, and I'll hand it over to the next speaker.
Okay, thanks for that, Daniel. Let me just ask, to the degree that, that you guys, people are leveraging your technology and stuff, what have kind of been the major lessons you've learned today?
I think that the big lesson, which I think is something that will be shared likely by the other speakers, is that the interface and the experience matters a lot. We think that fundamentally the ideas that we have are very decent, but getting them to users in a way that they can interact with it remains a challenge. So that's been a big, in terms of putting things into practice, been a challenge, which we're working on very actively. And also getting people to think in terms of this sort of cybernetic structure is also a challenge, because we're asking people to think about their organizations in new ways and to think about the interactions they're having with their peers and their organization in new ways. And that requires a little bit of a mental leap, which may or may not end up being a challenge.
And with the last question, then we'll move on to Zefram, but when you were talking about voting, have you learned about voting, kind of what do you consider, what percentage of people you need to vote to give it legitimacy, or can there be specialty in what people vote on?
That is a great question, something we've thought about a lot. In as much as we'd like to remove as much friction as possible, I think the idea of like the minimum necessary voting set is important. Like, how few people need to approve this? And I think one idea that we've had, which I like, is that if no one objects, then no one has to vote at all. If I want to move funds from A to B and no one has an issue with it, then we have the information that we need. We don't need a quorum. We can just do it, which I thought was a nice idea. So only when someone says this is not a good idea do we even go to a vote. And then depending on the action, more or less people are brought in, depending. So we have an idea of domains. Kind of a colony is a domain tree. And as you move up the tree, more people are involved. So if you can make decisions kind of at the fringes, then only a few people need to participate. But as the decision becomes more and more and more high level, then more people are brought in. So I do think making the voting set as dynamic as possible, with an emphasis on as few people as possible, will make the whole thing less frictionful at the end. But we haven't implemented this yet, so this is all.
Okay, well, cool. Well, thanks for that, Daniel. And now, Zefram, can you take over the?
Yeah, let me share my screen. Yep, can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yep. So hi guys. Today I'm gonna talk about something that's probably a bit meta and somewhat out there, but I think it's actually pretty important, and I don't see it emphasized anywhere else. So I decided to just talk about it. So this is what I call DAO safety. It'll make sense to you in a bit. So tech giants are runaway superhuman AIs. You probably never thought of like Facebook or Mark Zuckerberg as AIs, but I'm gonna explain why they kind of are. Well, they still aren't, but they share great similarities with superhuman AIs. So Facebook optimizes for profit. Obviously it's a corporation. It tries to find loopholes in like laws and regulations in order to maximize its profit. You've probably seen news like, oh, Facebook, steals this user information, or Facebook, dodges taxes or stuff like that. And they seem like obviously immoral to us, but why does Facebook do that? Because of profit. I mean, it makes sense, but it makes sense. Facebook obviously has enormous power over our everyday lives, over politics even, and as I said, it kind of disregards our notion of ethics and does a lot of unethical things, and it seems to be able to get away with it. And if you look at Skynet, it kind of does the same thing. Like, AI is optimized for their own utility functions, and they also, if there exists loopholes for it to, even further its utility, then it will do that. So, like, for instance, if you create an AI that tries to make the world, as happy as possible, then it might find a loophole and say, oh, like, I'm going to just plug everyone into this happy machine and everyone just plug in and stay there forever. Don't bother going to work or anything. Just sleep in the machine. Oh, sorry. And obviously AIs are powerful, and they also don't really care about our human or pathetic human ethics. So yeah, like Facebook and Skynet are obviously not the same, but in the aspect in which they are the same is that they're both non-human entities with distinctly non-human values. Like, they're not trying to optimize for, oh, world peace or maximum happiness even. They're just optimizing for like whatever they think is good, and that does not necessarily align with human values. And that's what makes them dangerous. So like one quick question you might have is, you know, why did Facebook become so powerful so quickly, but like say a company making toilet papers didn't? I mean, they're both like, I mean, a toilet paper company is still like a non-human entity trying to optimize for its profit. So like, why is it not so dangerous as, you know, we've seen Facebook and Google and other tech giants be? Answer is the web. So yeah, the web is open, free, and permissionless. And you know, they made stuff like Wikipedia possible. They made all sorts of wonderful collaboration and creation possible. But because the web is so like free of politics, free of a governance system, and free of like any sort of mechanism that controls like what is allowed to exist on the web does not have the ability to prevent the domination of Facebook, Google, and other tech giants. Yeah, like, so the web, you know, it's not the web's fault really. Like it's pretty idealistic in the early days, but yeah, like in any kind of like, let me rephrase. Yeah, like the web is sort of like this just petri dish that's free, that's like filled with all this like nutrients. And you know, like if you have just these normal bacteria, you know, like Wikipedia, you know, they just grow like normally, they just do what they do. But if you have like something that grows like exponentially, like Facebook, like Google, then it's just going to eat up everything. Doesn't matter like whether the web is founded on like these open and free principles. If an agent that can grow exponentially is allowed to exist on this platform, then it will, and it will just eat up everything. And enter blockchain and DAOs. It's also open, free, and permissionless, plus a bunch of other things. You know, it has permissionless interoperability. Like if I write a smart contract, like you don't need permission to like write another contract that just interacts with it. Like you can just do it. They're unstoppable. Like if you create like a DAO using any of these platforms, or just create a DApp, they're gonna be unstoppable, uncensorable, like unless you design it really poorly, of course. You have like access to DeFi instruments, like decentralized financial instruments, and those are really powerful. You have permissionless funding mechanisms. Yeah, obviously I have ICOs, but a whole bunch of other funding mechanisms has popped up, like Metacartel, Moloch, and DAOs are potentially more scalable than traditional corporations. You know, they're natively global, they're, you know, natively digital, and a lot of people have been experimenting with DAOs to make them more scalable. And so yeah, like the DAOs could very well be the next step for traditional corporations. And if the free and open web gave us, you know, Facebook, an open free blockchain, and the DAO platform might give us super Facebook. And it's going to be unstoppable, uncensorable. You know, what are you going to do about that? You know, like imagine if Facebook can just steals your data, except it's unstoppable. Like no one can stop it. That's going to be a nightmare. So what in the world should we be doing then? This is what I call DAO safety. So one way that we could try and restrain the like potential like super Facebooks is through creating like digital jurisdiction DAOs. You know, if you can't really beat them, then just join them. You just create like jurisdictions under which DAOs must follow a certain set of rules. It's basically like how like existing governments are using laws to restrict the behavior of corporations. You know, like environmental regulations, like privacy regulations, stuff like that. They don't work all that well, as we've probably seen in real life, but they're definitely better than nothing, and they definitely like do something. Yeah, this is what I think is a really important point, that like in order for, you know, super Facebooks to not emerge, like any human being should have a say in any DAO just because they exist in the same world. Because like any DAO could potentially become like exponential and just dominate everything, and it's going to be like even worse than Facebook. It's super Facebook. So like we don't really want to exist in such a world. So like any human who exists in this world should have some say in preventing the coming of super Facebook. So like Aragon and Claros are doing like jurisdictions, and yeah, it's still in early stages, but it's a good direction. But this is what I think is like really important. Developing like incentive alignment mechanisms for DAOs. So like, as I've said, like tech giants are kind of like just runaway superhuman AIs. So a lot of people, like a lot of incredibly smart people, have done research into AI safety, which is just like finding like ways to design the incentives of AI agents such that their values are aligned with human values. So we could learn from that, and we could try and build DAOs that are truly aligned with human values rather than just focus on its own perpetuation. And we should also like try and create such a human-friendly DAO that they are able to also grow exponentially and dominate before any DAO that's like aligned with non-human values is able to be born and dominate everything. And AI safety is like really hard, and it's still an open problem today. But as I've said, like companies aren't really AIs, DAOs aren't really AIs, so like it should be, I hope it is easier to solve than AI safety. And yeah, this is what I think is the holy grail of like research in this direction. So that's most of what I have to say. And I'll just leave you all with this quote, you know, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So if you can remember, you know, well, like most people can probably remember Facebook. But yeah, like we should remember what has happened in the past, what has happened with the web, and how its openness and freedom has allowed like just behemoths like Facebook and Google to emerge. And we should definitely learn from that experience to try and prevent something even worse and even more powerful from emerging on, you know, what the platforms that we are building today. So that's, yeah, that's everything.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Zefram. Can you just, you were talking about human aligned values. Can you just give a couple of examples of those just to make sure that everybody's, including myself, has the right context for what you mean?
Yeah, it's actually pretty easy to understand. Like for one, like not killing everyone is a human value, you know, like making people happy, that's a human value, but not so happy that you're just constantly plugged into a happiness machine and you're like just fed with like nutrients and like dopamines to like just keep you happy forever. Like, you know, like just Wally. Yeah. So human value is just, you know, what you value, you know, when you live your everyday life, like that's human values. Okay, and it's pretty obvious to see like what the non-human values are, right?
Yes. Okay. No, that makes sense. So thanks for sticking around. Next we have James Duncan from Abridged. So James, you grab the screen.
Awesome. So if I do this presenter view, can you all see my screen? Is it, or should I just go to the, let's see.
Yeah, you got to grab the screen.
Can you see the whole screen or?
No, you
I don't see the screen yet.
Now you've taken the screen.
You don't? Now I have?
Or no.
And then
I still don't see it.
On the, oh, really?
You see that tab at the bottom? It says share a screen On mine, it's green.
That's right. Oh, sorry there. There we go. Okay, sweet. Yes.
There you go. Rock and roll.
All right. Awesome. So yeah, thanks for hosting this, Lou. I really appreciate it, and pleasure to be on a panel with so many other people really leading this this new type of like coordination experiment, which is like what a DAO really is, I think. So I'm from Abridged. We've kind of been making our way into the DAO space. So we came together last year as a team really focused on mass adoption and creating extremely usable interfaces for blockchain technology. And from the get-go, actually, we were really quite involved with Metacartel. I had also been keeping up with like Aragon, DAO Stack, Colony, sort of all of the different frameworks that were available, and am extremely interested. And I think DAOs just in general are one of the more exciting concepts within blockchain today, and always have been. And I think you can see that with like the original DAO, the DAO, as being an extremely important social signal for how many people are excited about this concept. So my talk here is going to be actually sort of about something that Daniel alluded to. We are Abridged. We're focused on the social, on the actual interface design to make blockchain accessible. And one of the particular applications that we're most interested in is making DAOs accessible to then continue to run experiments and actually get data. So I'm going to talk a bit about DAOs and how we can get there. So first, I'm going to just go over like why DAO and what a DAO is. And I think this might be a little redundant, but to me, a DAO is very simply it aligns actors to coordinate in a system. And so it is essentially a type of structure that allows for a number of people or entities, maybe nodes in a network, to come together and perform some sort of function for the DAO to exist and provide its like intended value or purpose for the world. The benefit for crypto is that you have, to me, like two of the primary benefits is that it's globally accessible. And so this is, again, a new type of organization that both Zefram and Daniel alluded to. And it's you can create an entity now with people from around the world in a relatively frictionless way. The other piece is that it allows for transparent fund management, which is something quite unique for organizations today, which today even most NGOs have an issue with being transparent about their bookkeeping, because they don't want to be criticized essentially for the way that they manage funds. As we continue moving forward as a society, I think that it's healthy to actually to share how resources are managed. My internet connection just read unstable, so let me know if I'm cutting out. And so again, the next piece is what are DAOs, and I think DAOs are coordination. So the U.S. government was one of the first. It was the great experiment for democracy, and in a lot of ways, I think democracy is pretty well tied into what a DAO sort of is, as far as how humans are coordinating themselves. And so it is one of the sort of like prime examples of a extremely early version of a DAO with the 13 colonies and the checks and balances system that was created there. It's relatively elegant and it works quite well, and it has for more like hundreds of years. But it is still opaque and it's ripe for corruption in certain ways. The first real DAO, the DAO, and again, so to define the DO, decentralized organization, the US government's more of a decentralized organization, and Bitcoin would be the first DAO, which is an autonomous organization, where it is aligning actors based off of a program without having a lot of social input. It's essentially, Bitcoin was released and then nodes and people started mining it because of the reward that the system was giving them. And then ETH was, in my opinion, the second DAO. And I think both Bitcoin and ETH are probably the best examples of a proper decentralized autonomous organization today. The DAO, again, going back to the DAO, it was, it still serves as this incredible narrative for the entire ecosystem. And then the new democratic experiments that we're seeing today are things like Moloch, Aragon, DAOstack, and Colony, where they are coordinating humans with voting. And so I'm going to go a little bit more into this DAO variance between the DOs and the DAOs. The DOs, again, look like Colony, Moloch, and Metacartel. And to me, they're a little bit more permissioned. They're also reliant on social structures and in some ways are susceptible to sort of attack via social capital. Whereas the decentralized autonomous organizations like Bitcoin, Ethereum, even Uniswap, these are just essentially code that has been released and then coordinates actors in a relatively autonomous way based on the mechanisms that are rewarding people who are participating in the network. I think Aragon and DAOstack, and I would actually probably move Colony into this group as well. These protocols can be used in both ways. So they can both be more of a DO, and I think most of them are likely DOs or organizations of humans who are voting and making decisions around resources, rather than a DAO, which is a sort of a network that people can join and reap benefit from by acting a certain way. But that's sort of the variance that I see in the DAO world today. And then, I think that what drives DAOs is really this idea of freedom and individual freedom and a just society. And it's the idea of like making a system that is doing a better job at managing and distributing resources to society as a whole to make a better life for everyone. And I think that is totally the shining light, but today it's not the case. And there's a number of reasons for it not being the case, but I think we need to iterate quite a bit to get there. And so, I think that that's something that sort of Daniel mentioned again in his presentation, was that there's a lot of people who are focused on the mechanism design of these systems. But until we have these mechanism designs in practice with real users and data, it's going to be really difficult to understand how actors actually start behaving and what attack vectors there are. There will always be edge cases that are not perceived. And so what my position and what we think about at Abridged is that we need to sort of start iterating in order to understand that. A little bit of like insight into where we are today. So just even across all dApps within the blockchain ecosystem, there's about 80,000 users a day, which is orders of magnitude, like significantly like less than Facebook's user base. And then on top of that, the DAO population is a small sect of this 80,000 person user base. And so in order to make something new happen, I think that we need to have more experiments across a wider surface area. And from there, we can kind of find those use cases that communities and individuals can like find a lot of value from these new types of organizations. And so in order to do so, I'm like what we focus on at Abridged is no-code tools, so to bring in more devs to create more applications and experiments. Incremental decentralization, which is a design pattern that we use to onboard users, and then more focus on distribution to actually get those users once you have those onboarding processes in place. So the no-code tools, again, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, just to wrap it up, we got time at the end, hopefully for questions as well. But as you what's kind of been the macro lesson on UX that you've learned as you've seen how some of the different DAOs are structured?
Yeah, I think that the entire DAO space is really transitioning right now, and everyone is really quite focused on product market fit as far as I can tell. MetaMask has been the standard for onboarding for, since Bitcoin or since Ethereum began. And I think it's obviously done, it's an incredible product and it's done a lot of good, but it is a serious friction and a serious barrier to entry for 99% of users who actually come to interact with it. Like most people won't download MetaMask whenever they're prompted to. And so of the DAOs that I've talked to today, a lot of them are focused on making a cleaner UX. And to me, that looks like a mobily accessible interface that doesn't require a private key download or ETH to sort of get started. And then also ideally it's looking to feeless transactions via meta transactions or layer 2 solution. And so those are I think the things that people are most focused on right now is finding a way to get these integrated into places that people can really use. And I'll get to a little more detail here in just a second as I continue this.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So just so that we can get to Luis and leave a little bit of time at the end for questions, we can get back to it at the end.
Oh, sure, no problem. Oh, sorry, I've just gone over time. No problem at all.
No.
So yeah,
I was just Cool. So you can give the slides, and we can actually even record some stuff afterwards if you want to talk through some of the slides as well. And we post them so people can get them from SlideShare. If you guys want to.
Sure.
It's a great opportunity to get the ideas out there.
No problem.
So cool. So Luis, can you grab the
yes.
screen? Luis,
I am doing that.
Aragon.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I might as well start because we're a bit time constrained while I share the slides. So for those of you who are not familiar with Aragon, we're building this digital jurisdiction for digital organizations. And so the idea here is to basically create a place where digital organizations can exist. I call them digital organizations here more than DAOs because as James was saying, like a bunch of these DAOs today are actually not DAOs. They are more like kind of decentralized organizations, but not necessarily autonomous.
Luis, you didn't grab the screen.
Yeah, I'm really trying to. Let me just do it while I talk. Or I just take a minute to do it. Okay. There we go.
Sitting here in New York, hearing lots of sirens at the moment.
I can only imagine. Yeah, I don't know why this thing is not really working. I'm gonna try for like 1 more minute and then I'll just go in.
You can send them to me and then I can share the screen.
Okay, yeah, that would actually be that'd be great. So I'm just gonna do that. I can just share via email. Okay, there we go.
You send it an email or in the chat?
Yeah, I'm just gonna start in the chat. There we go. Okay, so here you go. Perfect. Yeah, so I'll just continue while that gets done. Yeah, so as I was saying,
I had to request access.
oh my God. Let me check.
Didn't it work? Didn't we do it before you got on the call?
I think.
Yeah, no, we didn't really get to this.
Just have to remember how much we all love technology, and everything's gonna be fine.
Man, it's like 2020, and these like things don't work. It's really amazing. Okay.
At least you don't have to use MetaMask to get into
I mean, that we find like a decentralized Google Drive in which every edit takes like half a buck. And okay, so you should have access in a minute.
Okay. Okay, cool. You can start.
Okay, there you go. Now, cool. Perfect. Yeah, so as I was saying, we are working on this digital jurisdiction for digital organizations, basically everything that digital organizations need in order to exist. So we started in 2016 after the DAO thing happened. So it was fun because no one really liked DAOs back in the day. Now DAOs are such a hot term, so it's been crazy to like just see the evolution. Now, right now, Aragon has more than 1,250 DAOs created on the platform, with more than $19 million worth of assets in them, and about $50 million secured. So basically, DAOs that are securing protocols, but they don't have the assets on them. So it is a lot of money. We definitely take a lot of pride in not getting hacked yet. So that's about 10% of what the DAO had back in 2016. Still very low amounts compared to that number, but we're on that path. So I don't know, Lou, if it works. Sharing the slides there.
Is that?
Does the sharing the slides work?
I'm doing the slides. So do you see?
Okay, perfect.
See my screen?
Okay, I do not
They're
really
not
see your
shared
screen.
yet.
Okay, hold on. Let me grab the screen. Okay, I will grab the screen. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect. That is perfect.
Okay.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, echoing some of what people have been saying here, like we see DAOs as Web3. Basically, like the whole Web3 vision for me is just DAOs. So like if you think about blogs back in the day, that was kind of just sharing, social media sharing and discussing ideas, and then DAOs are sharing, discussing, and actually taking action. Like there is so much stuff that is happening on the internet, like people discussing stuff. But if you look at the actual like action that is being taken, it is not that much. People are talking a lot, but not doing much because they just don't have the tools to do it. And so as like Joel Monegro, which is one of our kind of like advisors from Placeholder, a VC firm, he likes to say that Aragon should be like more than a Facebook group, but less than a company. And it's kind of like that balance that we're trying to strike. And so, yeah, we can just go to the next one. So basically the thing that we're trying to focus on now is unincorporated communities. That is the way that we're trying to like call it now, because they are truly becoming the way of creating value. Like right now, we don't see many of those actually. I would say one unincorporated community that has been really capturing a lot of mindshare lately is Metacartel, for example. And these communities are like so early, and right now they are like so chaotic and so small compared to everything that's going on in the world. But what's happening there is really special because they are so fast moving. Like if you compare like company life, like in the 50s to now, it's been reduced so much, and we are going to see that reduce even to like probably years or months in which things just get created. People do stuff, they organize, and then it shuts down, and then up to the next thing. So we can go to the next one.
Yeah, but this, by the way, the next show is at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Is called What Metacartel Did.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, just talking about kind of the latest in the Metacartel family.
That's very cool. Yeah, so just going on to the next one. I think these communities are also like the way to create belonging and the way for people to be part of something. Yeah, we can just go to the building blocks. Yeah.
There you go, building blocks.
Yeah, so in terms of building blocks, like in 2016 when we started Aragon, the blocks were so early, like everything was just so early that like it was so hard to create DAOs in the beginning. But now all the blocks are kind of ready. Like we have all the Web2 stuff, like blogs, forums, messaging apps like Discord, Telegram. Really a fan of the work that Abridged is doing in that matter of like trying to use push DAOs into Telegram, so they're like so easy to use. Then there is like tokens and membership, liquidity on Uniswap. You have DeFi, and then eventually you have DAOs that kind of like just are the glue that gets everything together and makes all of these tools work together. So yeah, if we go to the next one, to the slide. We are creating this digital jurisdiction. The first network service that this jurisdiction is providing to DAOs is Aragon Court. And Aragon Court basically allows a decentralized organization to do the same that we would do in the traditional world, which is have legal agreements that are written in English, for example, and then have a court that can resolve disputes if someone doesn't honor that agreement. Why this is important is because today DAOs are just restricted to interactions that can happen in smart contracts. And that is just very, very, very few interactions compared to the whole world of like human interactions that we're seeing out there in our day-to-day. And so with Aragon Core, people will be able to just write in plain English, like this DAO is gonna work on planting trees, or it's gonna work on curating content in a social platform. And then if someone creates a proposal that doesn't abide by those rules or that manifesto or that mission, then you can dispute it and bring it to the court. So go to the next one. Basically, the idea is we create this kind of like dry.
Can you talk about, Luis, kind of examples of the court usage? Because that's obviously something that's super interesting about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. So for example, like the most important thing that people are trying to do with this, it still hasn't launched, but the users are telling us is they want to be able to filter some kind of votes. So for example, in a DAO that has a treasury, that has funds, they may want people not to be able to use like withdraw all of them at once, or like, fund ISIS or like terrorism with those funds, stuff like that, which is kind of funny. But in general, there's stuff that you cannot encode in like a budgeting app. It needs to be like more kind of like subjective. So there's a lot of that that can happen there. I think also freelancing is a very good use case, like just having freelancers over the internet that want to work with each other, and someone being able to check the quality of the work and being able to like rule on the favor of one party or another is very interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, so we can just jump into the next one, the future. So yeah, we are trying to build bridges now. Now that the software is ready and everything is ready, we're trying to build bridges, working with the Metacartel and Moloch communities. Also, I think someone built a bridge with Colony recently, which was very exciting to see. And yeah, we're just trying to be friendly and build stuff, focus on these communities, try to nail onboarding as well, trying to work with people to figure that out. Again, fan of what Abridged is doing for onboarding there. I like MetaMask, but we need to like get better for just like the mainstream audience. And then also making these tools invisible, so they take like the backseat and people can actually focus on creating value. And it's less about the tool they are using and more about actually collaborating together. So yeah, that's it. And this final slide, those are my contact details.
Yeah, I just let me just ask a question. So, on the onboarding thing, making the onboarding easier, which probably means not doing what MetaMask is doing, but to some degree, at least my understanding is what MetaMask is doing a really good job for and solving for is security. And so, do you think that we're going to have to give on security in some ways to get an easier onboarding? In which case, maybe it's for a set of assets that maybe isn't your life savings and all of your Bitcoin, but is some other assets that if you lose, okay, you don't want to lose, but it's
yeah. Well, what we're seeing with people that want to interact with DAOs and they are not like very that they're like just mainstream users is that in the beginning they will have some tokens that are worth basically nothing, that are worth like just being a member of a community. So for example, I'm working on this initiative called Help DAO, which basically is creating a DAO framework for local squads to form to help people with the virus right now, or help people affected by the whole like pandemic in general. So like people who are like 80 plus, for example, and you cannot get food today because like supply chain is broken and they cannot even like get food delivered. And so trying to build that software requires that other people can donate to these squads. And I just want people to like literally be able to put a credit card and get a membership token that they can use later on if the squad, if they want to participate in the governance of that particular squad or DAO. And for that, it's so low stakes that like I don't care if they use their phone number, but later in like a year or something, if that becomes a thing and that squad is doing really great and they want to use that token, maybe they can put it on MetaMask. But that first step has to be so easy.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, well, look, that was great, and so happy to see if we've got any questions. I know people have been asking and answering questions during the call, which is great. But what I think would be great to get from each of you is we're talking about obviously DAOs are now we have been a thing now and they're going up to the right in terms of the numbers, and obviously it's still really, really early in all of it. And I think that's like one of the first lessons everybody has to realize is, oh my God, it's so early. But what have each of you seen? Why don't you talk about like one project or one thing you're seeing that you're super excited about? And you want to start, Daniel? We'll go and say
My pleasure. Yeah, so if you're following the kind of chat we're talking about, what's our favorite live DAO, and everyone agrees that it's Metacartel. I think that kind of one of the reasons why I think this is a bigger point worth discussing is really how much is this about the right machinery on chain, and how much of this is about making sure that the social layer is running. I think James got to this with his sort of dialectic about how important is the social layer, how important is sort of the machinery. And I think I want to point out that even in the case of Bitcoin, which is maybe the best example of something that is fully autonomous, even it is not, because it assumes a certain distribution of miners, for example. It makes assumptions about its social layer. And those assumptions are, I think, weaker, which is why it's so compelling, but they're there nonetheless. And something that is, at the other end, you could just say, let's all just put our money in a big pile on the table and everyone will take however much that they need. And that's no structure, and it's all depends on the social layer. And that's like the other extreme. And and that will fail immediately because there's no security. Right. But I think realizing that it is ultimately always about a sort of a balance of structure and softness that will make something run. And I think a really good metaphor here is to even look at a human body, which has a skeleton and tissue. And the skeleton provides the structure, but the tissue contains the information. And it's only when they're balanced does the human body work correctly. If you have too much of one or the other, the whole thing falls apart. You have a dead skeleton or a pile of goo. I think that metaphor as something to keep in our minds, I think is useful, because really it is always a balance, and it's always about finding that balance.
Right. And so with Metacartel, it seems to me that they have a very strong socio. A lot of them have met each other, on multiple times, let alone all the time they spend on Zoom, or whatever, interacting.
Yes, exactly.
Super interesting. Zefram, you want to chime in?
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat what the question was? Oh,
no, I was just wondering in terms of the projects, and I know in the chat room they were talking about Metacartel, but just interesting to hear, what you're excited about in terms of DAOs that are actually out there, or, some element of a DAO that you're super excited about.
Yeah, I'm definitely also super excited about Metacartel. I've been participating in a lot of their events, and it's been great. Let me think,
but
about the DAO.
Goes back to the social layer, right, that Daniel was talking about.
Yeah, the social layer.
And the community, right? So communities, a lot about community is not necessarily, zeros and ones.
Right. Yeah. So communities, for DAOs, I think we already have a sufficiently good enough technical layer, especially what Aragon has been doing. So right now DAO is more of a social coordination problem than just building the tooling itself, because we're already seeing a lot of live DAOs on Aragon, seeing a lot of Moloch clones, seeing Metacartel.
Anything working that you're excited about?
Anything working? Yeah, honestly, it's still extremely early. I'm excited about Metacartel, but these Moloch DAOs are still just grant giving DAOs. They're not revenue generating. They're not self-sufficient, so to speak. I think
they're like single-celled amoebas. They're the first incarnation of life DAO.
Yeah, Metacartel is, I think, has spun off the venture DAO. That's a for-profit DAO that's doing VC type stuff. Yeah, I think that's pretty exciting.
That's loud, right?
Yeah, because it's able to kind of sustain itself through making these profits. And I think once we start seeing DAOs that are truly self-sufficient rather than just relying on donations, I think that's when we're going to see something really magical happening. Okay. I don't think that's really happened today yet.
Yeah, hard to argue. James?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, you know, for-profit DAOs and self-sustaining DAOs, that's when the actual flywheel starts. We're definitely not there yet, and have some iteration cycles to go before we get there. Even like, I guess this time last year, I was playing with this concept of a DApp DAO, where you have a DApp and then you're building a DAO around it, and then it's receiving funding from maybe like a grant giving DAO, and then can give some sort of portion of their revenue back to that grant giving DAO, and then that system can kind of, that flywheel can start turning. But still, you know, we have iterations to go before we get there, and it requires that you have a product that's like profitable and can generate revenue. The thing that I'm most excited about in the near term, though, is actually, so, you know, we've been collaborating across the board, obviously deeply involved with the Meta Cartel, and they funded the first Signal DAO, which was the first Telegram interface that had DAO functionality. And it was just for voting. It was on testnet, and it's very simple in its design, and it gave us a lot of really great feedback for validating this crypto social network idea that Luis actually kind of alluded to, that it's like a more robust Facebook group where you have both people in a community forum that's online, and then you insert like an incentive layer that can collect opinions as well as distribute resources within that community or outside of it. And so what we're building right now is in tangent to the help DAO, and maybe, you know, we'll build it like, you know, with the help DAO, and in cooperation with Aragon right now is the first sort of on-chain system for this social interface that allows for DAO functionality. And that really gets to the distribution piece, where you can actually start experimenting with these mechanisms and build in different frameworks and structures underneath a common interface that people don't have to move from in order to interact with. And I think your security question earlier is like on point. And I think it's really about starting small with those like $10 experiments, let's say, and then continuing to iterate to kind of find the proper social mechanisms and back-end mechanisms. And I'll throw the link in this chat too, if anyone wants to get involved with this COVID-19 DAO. We will have a working implementation by next week for people to start onboarding. So feel free to hit me in this chat or join that. I just put it in our public chat. So
super cool. And Luis, I guess you're going to get kind of the last opportunity to chime in with some thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, normally I completely agree with the fact that most DAOs are not sustainable right now, and I really want to sustainable DAOs. But today, with everything that's going on in the world, there is actually my favorite DAO that I will select for now is actually a very unsustainable DAO. It's a donation-based DAO. There is this DAO that formed with 300 like amateurs and volunteers, and also like some professionals and 3D printers, to basically create a decentralized supply chain of 3D printed gear for medical personnel. And they are you can actually donate on Gitcoin right now with the share around. And I mean, this is awesome. Like, they are basically building these things and organizing as a DAO to make sure that they get like the scale of decentralized organization. And so yes, it is a money losing DAO, but it is a life-saving DAO, so I think it's worth it.
Very cool. Well, look, thanks guys. I thought this was a great second show. You know, learned a lot. So appreciate you guys coming. As I said, I'm going to put it up on YouTube, and we'll send you links, and then we'll be writing up a blog post, because there are definitely 5, 7, 10 lessons at the least to be learned, you know, for the people who don't want to spend, even though it's time well spent, the hour listening to it. But thanks again. And thanks everyone for chiming in, you know, for dialing in. See you guys.
thanks, Lou.
Thanks.
Ciao, everyone.